limitations that I had were vexing. For books, I was really satisfied with the books that I was reading. I got to a place where I would just kind of sit around, and I want this. I want this. Now that I'm back to listening to all kinds of music, I want a list of things to do. Washing the dishes, weed whacking, playing video games. Something I always love video games. I have three things that are called grind. Grind music, which is, you have grind core music, but also, noise is so heavily related to grind core, and dungeon synth and vaporwave are so similar to noise in the way that they're produced because they're overproduced. We got too many a lot of one man projects releasing a lot of albums, so it has the grind kind of thing. It relates to grind house cinema that was exploitation films. I've kind of had that reference going for a while because it's so similar. They would do the double feature, which is so similar to the split. I went from so many topics. Let me roll the intro and then I'll go ahead and. But yeah, I think it would be an honorable thing, a beneficial thing, if we all just put our heads together and collected the ideas of the things that we're supposed to be doing. I listen to music a lot when I burn CDs. I do. Movies are maybe even a little bit better because you're just like, ah ha, and then you're like, oh, okay. You know? So movies work really well with a CD burning, and I might keep that for that. I don't have any CDs to burn. There's nothing on the queue right now. Oh, yeah, not yet. No, I'm still waiting for some things. There's a couple things that are intended to be released, yet I have no means of no. I don't have anything to do, so no burning, no printing. But the way that I felt with music was, this is good. I just want more though, and the same thing with movies. These are good. I just want more. The books completely satisfying, and that was the way that I added a ninth movie with about a week left of the program. That was Pulp Fiction because of Reservoir Dogs. I just said I want to watch this movie so bad. Reservoir Dogs and Inglourious Basterds. I wanted to add another Quentin Tarantino movie. Um, but yeah, especially Flyer and Magic Sword made me want to watch a bunch more kung fu movies, and they were so. I can say it heavily improved my taste. The stuff that I've watched since has been really great. Harakiri was a movie that I watched. Um, I had it on DVD because I knew it. I didn't know any other way to watch it. Evidently, it's free on YouTube right now. It might have been the remake. I don't know. It's possible that I did good getting the movie, but I have the DVD. I'm happy to have it, and it's one of the greatest movies I've ever seen. Harakiri. I wanted to watch Lady Snowblood. Not as pleasant, and I didn't like that quite as much. I wanted to watch Yojimbo. There's so many. Yeah, there's so many. Martial arts films are very aesthetically, but especially samurai films are very aesthetically appealing. And I kind of want that, even though Harakiri was heavy, and I don't want to have a less than positive experience. But Pulp Fiction, when I watched it, and when I broke the rule and watched it, and I maintained, other than that, I maintained the program. I watched that probably 5 times in a short period of time, less than a week, um, and watched, and this is where it seems like I'm breaking the rule, but it was really, really what I needed to do. I watched all the videos I could find on that movie, um, so that I could kind of hyper analyze it and think about all the extra stuff and to hear what other people are saying about it. And of course, it gets redundant when you watch a lot of informational videos about, oh, did you know that it was originally supposed to be Johnny Depp instead of Tim Roth? Which is so funny. I look exactly like Tim Roth in that movie right now. Yeah, that was where the ideas started. That was where I laid in bed after all of that. I thought and thought and thought, and my mind exploded with with ideas, with thought. And because of the books that I was reading, which again, unlike movies and music, I was very satisfied with what I was reading because it takes a lot longer to read. It's not the same thing over and over and over again. You can really jump into a sea with a book, and then when you get out of there, it's like, whoa, that was a portion of my life. It felt like a chapter of my life when I was reading that book. Oh, this is back when I was reading that book. You can kind of say that. And this was a lot of reading, and it really, really anchored my attention. The two books were Schoenberg's book on composition and Fuchs. Two of the books were Schoenberg's book on composition, Desiring God by John Piper. I've been such a fan of that pastor for a really long time. So it was a little bit of that was, the book was undeniably great. It was incredible. And I really enjoyed it for that. But it was stuff that I was familiar with. I wasn't turning over new rocks. Yet it would have been harder to read. It wouldn't have been such a casual read um, if it was new stuff. And I think that that could have been a problem, but it wasn't because I had stuff that was kind of unfamiliar, like Star Trek and these books on composition. The books on composition, I started composing with sheet music, which was completely alien to me. I was just playing with it for a while, and then I had something that I liked, and I just kept working on it and working on it. One of the compositions, well, I'm jumping ahead. The what happened was I started going and sitting in Starbucks and working. It's kind of like performative working. I'm gonna be show everybody how smart I am or how virtuous I am sitting on working on my laptop here in this coffee shop. And that's a good way to make yourself focus. You're like, I have to be just as driven as everybody else in here because we're all judging each other. I'm really big into avoiding, inflating my ego, but um, putting yourself in that kind of competitive place. I mean, I was doing whatever I could to focus. I started taking books into the bathtub with me instead of my phone because I can't. I love going in the bathtub, but I cannot just sit here with this death device right here. This is a death device. This causes all kinds of problems, and I was not about to have myself spending time with it. And that, as a matter of fact, get that out of here. Um, it's just it's going to cause problems, even more so than the computer. At least on the computer, I have a thing on YouTube where it doesn't give me a home page with all kinds of recommendations. And that's not really good for me to be recommending to my audience, but it I I yeah, I can't yeah that when I'm uploading Noise with Ivan videos, I can't risk the temptation of seeing all these videos and I want to click on them and they've got appealing thumbnails. I think that those were two things that I kind of added in. But the number one thing for everything that you do all the time, because you can't just work out of the house all the time. You have to, if you're doing creative work, you have to be involved in it, and you can't just not read. Yeah, I suppose, not everybody takes reading to be as beneficial or valuable of a thing as I do. That's the way I was raised. My mom emphasized reading a lot and raised me in a way that I love reading. That's not something I want to lose. And I know a lot of people that used to read a lot and now they're on social media a lot. And I I think I very much was that. I'm not willing to say that I ever really read a lot, but those things really created like I had the opposite of writer's block where I was just having ideas all the time and just wrote. And now there's so much work to do because I've kind of mapped something out. Um, the idea is the best part with putting a project together, and then it's a whole lot of work. You kind of wish you could just have a meeting and then get excited about doing this project, but the work after that is, ooh, it's a lot of work. But the work for me for a musician, I think the work is a lot of fun too. I enjoy mixing and I'm coming to enjoy composing with sheet music. But that's going to be a difficult thing. I had been working on that score and I took it to a friend. I'm just looking for, right now, it's a process of looking for how am I going to set this up? How do you go from one place to the next? Are we just going to have a complete classical piece of music? Is that what this is? Is it have none of the things that I started out with, which is not my intention. It's just, it's sometimes there are places that you want to go that sheet music is going to benefit you for, and I can't do that with a MIDI controller. I've gone as far as I can with a MIDI controller, I think. Of course, there are artists that have gone places that I have not gone that are, more experienced and talented, I'm sure, than me with MIDI keyboards, but I am just not interested in it anymore. There's not any growth that I can see. And maybe that growth will come later and I have to go back to it. Um, And as I've gotten back into listening to a lot of power electronics and a lot of noise, a lot of harsh noise, I miss doing that, and I haven't done that recently. But I have friends that I don't think I need to make noise. I think that writing is where, literally just writing and thinking is where this thing needs attention. So yeah, the score is a big part of it, but why? And I had taken this sheet music to a friend, and I said, "What do you think of this?" Who's very familiar with composition, and he said, "Well, what is it supposed to be? How is it supposed to feel?" I said, "Well, cold, I suppose." And he says, it does not feel cold." And I loved how blunt he was with that. He said, "This does not feel cold. Let me give you some examples." And he played The Frozen Cathedral by John Mackey, which I am just in love with. I'm amazed by it. And that's what I told him. I said, every composition that I hear right now, I feel like it just, like having composed and come up with some things too. It's like when you first start playing guitar and you're watching people do solos and you're very amazed. You just got. I remind myself of Salieri every time that I listen to something that's incredible, and that was the what I had with the Frozen Cathedral. Um, I suppose I wasn't familiar. If you look at John Mackey, it's not like looking at any of these old. You look at Mahler, and he's like, you're like, dang, that was a different era, huh? Or you look at Glass, and he just looks like a genius. He's like, oh, and he's got his hair all over the place. Or Moondog, and he's got that big old beard. Let's think of some more guys. Everybody looks old school, so you can't relate to him. But when you look at John Mackey, it's different. So we don't. I don't know. You don't really want to you don't look the same way at modern composers as you would someone from a long time because you already know these old guys. They've stood the test of time. Holst has stood the test of time. But yeah, I always remember the scene whenever I look at a score, that's from a real composer. I feel like Salieri when he's writing for Mozart's laying in bed and telling him what we're gonna put on the paper, and then Salieri and then writes it down. And I thought, oh my gosh, he's so dramatic. No one would ever be. I know the real Salieri was this dramatic, but I understand it very much now. I think I can relate. I could steal. I suppose you could take composition that's public domain because right now, like if I was to use Mozart right now, Mozart's composition, I would be open to do that. He died a long time ago. But it's not really what I'm interested in doing. I will say that one of my favorite albums ever is My Love is Higher Than Your Assessment of What My Love Could Be by Harvey Milk, one of the greatest sludge metal albums of all time. Um, that band, Joe Preston was from the Melvins, was in that band. He had been fired from the Melvins and joined that band, and boy, I'm sure glad he did. And he had a lot of cool projects that he did after the Melvins. So I'm kind of grateful, because the Melvins are going to be the Melvins. So I'm kind of grateful that that happened, and I think it was a beneficial thing that Buzz kicked him out. I don't know if he did better with drugs. Of course, you have like Cobain getting fired from working on Houdini the same way because he was too strung out. He did not really get better, but he did Nirvana. You know what I mean? So sometimes it takes a getting fired. I've been thinking recently of First Corinthians 5 when Paul says, "You this guy slept with his stepmom or married his stepmom. Somebody married their stepmom in the Church of Corinth," and he said, "You don't just pass over that. You don't just you have to kick him out of the church because if you act like that's not a problem and you act like oh this is cool okay you do that's not the way it works. You have to kick them out, and kicking them out is not saying we're better than we can't have you. We're saying this is not the place for you to do that. And what it does for them in the long run is it benefits them. So then you have Joe Preston coming out with all these other projects that are incredible, and Kurt Cobain doing Nirvana, as opposed to just being Melvin's people. Melvin's produced so many great projects. Harvey Milk is one of them, but maybe under the radar a little bit. Of course, with the internet, it has risen quite a bit. And one of the most inspirational albums to me ever. I thought it was very emotional, and it has that kind of blue collar exhausted feel to it. Uh, and The Anvil Will Fall uses, just like my friend, he put on Neptune for me, for a cold feeling from the planets as well, just the same as alongside the Frozen Cathedral. The Frozen Cathedral I had not heard before, though, so that was incredible. But when I heard, Holst is also amazing and blows my mind every time, and I wasn't any less like Salieri having the reactions to that composition. As opposed to Neptune, he had Jupiter. Crescent Spires had Jupiter in The Anvil Will Fall on that album. So that's not really talent, is certainly not what I think of myself doing, just taking an amazing composition. But when I hear these kinds of compositions, I'm sure the same way that Salieri heard Mozart's, I could never do that, how? How would I ever be capable of composing something that incredible? So I understand it in the way that the planets blows my mind every time I hear it. My whole body does a thing, and I am at a loss for words. It's just so incredible. I can never get enough of that piece by Holst. But The Anvil Will Fall, as soon as that guitar starts, that sludge metal guitar starts, tears. I cannot. It's nuts. I don't know that there's a huge value. Also, Harvey Milk turned me on to Leonard Cohen because there was a cover of One of Us Cannot Be Wrong. And the way he sings it is not the I lit a thin green candle. This is I lit a thin, like there's an anger or a frustration. There's a lot more emotion in his voice than Cohen lets the words do their thing. Cohen's a poet, but Creston Spires' voice, that voice is takes those records so far. It's also insane that uh, Joe Preston was in Men's Recovery Project, High on Fire. I forgot all about some of those bands. Earth 2 and The Whip. They had The Whip with, I think that was with Cody Willis from the Melvins. Yeah, I had a phase. Yeah, no, Jared Warren. But yeah, Cody Willis was from Big Business rather, and then in the Melvins because Big Business was in the Melvins. Really, Big Business was in the Melvins. I don't know whatever got me out of sludge metal. I suppose that you have phases with everything, and I question, wait, what was after sludge metal? I suppose it was noise and then jazz and classical music that I went to from sludge metal. Um, and then later on, of course, as I got involved in music, you just switch everything that you've ever liked out. And then I got more into it, just slightly more into all of the things that I've ever liked. Um, but yeah, I remember because I didn't just like the Melvins were number one, but Harvey Milk was the cherry on top of all that stuff. But Conan was so great. Hawk as a Weapon, and High on Fire was really good. Um, 10,000 or 100,000 Years, but there was also a Kiss song called 10,000 or 100,000 Years. I don't know the difference between the two. I'm not going to remember it anyway. But that High on Fire song was, oh my goodness, good. But that really says a lot about Joe Preston and with Sun-O and everything that he's been involved in. Oh my goodness. It was so interesting to see Lady Snowblood, and I realized that that was because Roman Shower said, "I have a cover. Do you want to use it? Because I don't have a problem. I don't have a project for it." And I did want to use it. And then so Bastard Sword with the cover, and I believe that that's the same movie. Never knew what it was, but it inspired me to get into samurai movies. I was like, yeah, but it's honestly not my favorite. I like the 60s. Well, no, that was from the 60s. I don't know. Seven Samurai and Harakiri were spectacular to me, and Lady Snowblood next to those is just not. It's cool. There are a lot of things I do like about that movie. But yeah, that was when Contrite Heart was Bastard Sword. I renamed Bastard Sword Contrite Heart. And it just with that, it was the reason I did was because there was a sludge metal band called Bastard Sword, and they had a they were a fun band. I could stand to go back and listen to them actually. I became a fan of them because I realized that I had stolen their name. I believe though when I used the name Bastard Sword, I had in parenthesis next to it Hosea 19 to reference to use the bastard. Um, my idea with it, sin is like disowning yourself from God and saying, I was not yours, and and taking up a weapon and attacking Christ on the cross. That's me approaching me approaching sin, and then it had that on the cover because Roman Shower had made that cover and said, Would you like this for anything?" And it became the Bastard Sword cover. By the way, I'm going to be giving those away in mystery boxes. I'm trying to get rid of all the old Blu-ray sleeved um, CDRs that I used to do because I don't have a good way to store them. Which that's the thing, nobody really does. So a lot of Woods Mattress, my split with Woods Mattress, there's a lot of those. There's a lot of Bastard Swords. There's a few handwritten letters left. So I'm going to be looking for people to give those to, either mostly in mystery boxes, but probably also just to friends and other artists. Yeah, that band was decent. It reminded me a lot of Reverend Bazaar or something like that. So it was pretty cool. I was pretty upset because I liked the name, but Contrite Heart is so much better, and the project gained so much depth, and the idea behind Contrite Heart, having a contrite heart, is a endless pursuit of mine, much more meaningful. The meditation on sin that I have should probably be more in prayer than it is in art. Um, and I, I, I expressed it. You know what I mean? A Man Hates God was a while ago. Portraits of Cain was a while ago. Handwritten Letters had enough of that, and so did Slavery. And I'm not saying I'm gonna have complete joy, joy funk albums from here on out, but they'll probably be complex. I can say from what I'm already doing, it's there's complexity there, but I don't really aim to do the same thing. I like how Contrite Heart is. So what if I did something that was Contrite Heart but just more complicated, more complex, more starting at point A and going to point B and then even going to point C and D, you know. I would like to have a little bit more complexity in the project. Um, and Contrite Heart is awesome. I love it. But I haven't done one in a while, so I might do one of those and then finish this project. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to completely abandon the works that I have now, but that's something that you have to be okay with doing, is abandoning something that you worked on and giving it time, thinking about what you're going to do before you put it out. Because I've put out a lot of crap, put out a lot of bad stuff. So anyway, I thought I would kind of address that, where what everything happened. I had recorded a video like this a couple times, leading up to the last video that I published. I don't think there's anything else. I was gonna get into the stuff that DRC Brian from Disfigured Robot Child recommended to me. I'm really grateful for recommendations. If anybody has a recommendation for me, I'm happy to listen to those projects. Um, but he sent a lot, and I'm gonna have to go ahead and listen to those. And he's drumming up a harsh noise phase for me, which I really like. I'm becoming a fan all over again because I had you and you saw me in the show. Like Headset was the first artist that I was really into, and I was like, "This is great. This is what I'm looking for. This is perfect." That Headset 3 inch that I got when I decided I was going to do this, perfect. And Disfigured Robot Child when I first got to Gates of Hypnos, perfect. You know, um, time to get back into it. You know what I mean? So all that be said, there are tons of Harsh Noise reviews coming. I like that I balanced this out with talking about a lot of albums last week and then kind of talking about the artistic process this week. Ease it up a little bit, you pull the brakes. I didn't want to just kind of drown this show out with me talking about the artistic process and how the 8 week program affects me. Um, But also, I don't want to leave that open ended or just act like, oh, yep, no, didn't work. Never mind, it worked. It worked very well, and I wrote and wrote and wrote, and I'm still writing and still working. So go read some books. Godspeed.